All right, let's dive into one of the most polarizing figures from the final days of the Russian Empire, Grand Duke Sergei Alexandrovich. So who was this man? Was he this ruthless, iron-fisted tyrant? Or was he a deeply pious man, even a martyr? The answer is, well, it's complicated. And to really get a handle on the contradictions of his life, we actually have to start at the very end, his incredibly violent public death. So you gotta picture this. It's a cold afternoon in Moscow, February 1905. Grand Duke Sergei is riding in his carriage right through the Kremlin, the absolute heart of Russian power. He just said goodbye to his wife at the palace and was on his way to a meeting, all alone. He had no idea that a team of terrorists from the Socialist Revolutionary Party was lying in wait for him. The bomb, made of nitroglycerin, was tossed right into his lap. The explosion was just instantaneous, and the accounts from the time are absolutely horrific. His wife, Ella, heard the blast, and when she ran to the scene, she literally had to kneel in the snow and gather the pieces of her husband's body herself. It was a stunning act of political violence, and the shockwaves were felt all across Europe. But it really makes you ask the question, who exactly was this man? And what on earth could he have done to inspire that level of pure, visceral hatred? Why was he the target? Well, if you had asked his many, many enemies, the answer was simple. To them, he was the Iron Governor. He was a hard-line reactionary, the living symbol of everything they hated about the autocracy. See, back in 1891, his brother, Tsar Alexander III, gave Sergei one of the most powerful jobs in the entire empire. As Governor General of Moscow, he wasn't just a mayor. No, he was basically a viceroy. He ruled Russia's second city with an authority that was second only to the Tsar himself. And his 13 years in that job were just soaked in controversy. I mean, from the very beginning, his actions built up this reputation for being totally ruthless and inflexible. And it was that reputation that would, in the end, seal his fate. He started his term with an act that would really define this brutal reputation. He enforced an imperial order to kick out Moscow's entire Jewish population. 20,000 people. Just think about that. Artisans, families, merchants, all forced out of their homes in a single year. Now, sure, it was the Tsar's policy, but Sergei enforced it with such harshness that he became the face of that purge. But the event that absolutely destroyed his public image was the Kodinka tragedy in '96. During the coronation party for his nephew, the new Tsar Nicholas II, a huge crowd gathered for free gifts. But the planning was a disaster. The field was a mess of ditches, and there were barely any police. A rumor started that the gifts were running out, and it caused a massive stampede. Over 1,300 people were trampled to death. As governor, Sergei got the blame, and when he didn't even show up at the funerals, it just cemented this image of him as cold, callous, and incompetent. But here's the thing. That image of the cold-hearted tyrant, as powerful as it is, it's not the whole picture. To get to the real contradictions of the man, we need to leave Moscow and travel all the way to Jerusalem, because there, Sergei was seen in a totally different light. Listen to this. This is what a simple Russian pilgrim said when they arrived in Jerusalem. And the man they were thanking for creating this heaven on earth? It was none other than Grand Duke Sergei. As the head of a society that supported the Orthodox faith in the Holy Land, Sergei put all his energy into building the Sergei Courtyard. This was a huge complex, basically a safe haven for the thousands of poor Russian pilgrims who made the long journey to Jerusalem. It wasn't just some building, it was a real act of faith and charity, with clean rooms, food, and even medical care. For Sergei, this project was deeply, deeply personal. And he wasn't just a figurehead. There's this one great story about him visiting the courtyard, and he saw a leaky faucet in a pilgrim's room. Instead of calling for someone, he grabbed a wrench and fixed it himself. Now, that's not something an arrogant, distant aristocrat does. That's the act of a man who genuinely cared about his duty, right down to the smallest detail. So, which one was the real Sergei? The Iron Governor of Moscow, or the pious pilgrim of Jerusalem? To get closer to the truth, you have to look at his personal life, which, you guessed it, was just as polarizing and contradictory as his public one. It's really fascinating. Even the people in his own family saw two completely different men. His own cousin called him a monster, saying he had not a single redeeming feature. Ouch. But then his niece, who he helped raise, she saw someone else. She said he was shy, nervous, and incredibly religious, someone she felt irresistibly attracted to, even with his tough exterior. And then there was his marriage. The rumor mill, especially his political enemies, loved to whisper that it was all a sham, that he was secretly gay. But the actual evidence points to something way more devoted. He and his wife Ella were really close for a royal couple. I mean, they shared a bed their entire marriage, which was super rare. And after he was killed, she was so completely shattered that she gave up her royal life, became a nun, and started a convent in his name. But there's one more piece to this whole puzzle, and it's a huge piece of context that was mostly hidden at the time. All his life, Sergei suffered from this really severe form of TB that attacked his joints. It left him in constant grinding pain. He actually had to wear a spinal corset all the time just to hold himself up. And suddenly, his famous stiffness, his reserved, almost harsh personality, it starts to make sense. Maybe it wasn't pride people were seeing, but a man trying his best to hide a lifetime of chronic agony.
So, after all that, how does history remember a man like this? Well, it's no surprise that his legacy is every bit as dramatic and contested as his life was. Honestly, the battle over his memory is perfectly summed up by what happened to his actual body. After he was killed, he was buried with honor in a Kremlin monastery. But then, after the revolution, the Soviets came in, tore the whole monastery down, and paved right over his crypt to make a parking lot for government officials. His memory was literally buried. But then, in this amazing twist, construction workers stumbled upon the tomb in 1990, and in the new, post-Soviet Russia, he was finally reburied with full honors. So in the end, you're left with these two completely different versions of Grand Duke Sergei that just seem impossible to square. For revolutionaries and reformers, he was the symbol of everything that was rotten about the old regime. But for pilgrims and Orthodox believers, he was a protector of the faith, a man of incredible charity and duty. And it leaves us with a pretty big question. Is it possible for someone to be both of those things at the same time? A political villain who is also, in his own way, a man of real faith and conviction? Or does one part of a person's life, the good or the bad, eventually have to cancel the other one out? That's definitely something to think about.